Hello, Angel.
Hello, Angel.
Good morning, angels.
Good morning, Charlie.
The time has come. The time has come to talk about The Idol. I sat down and basically subjected myself to 5 hours of torture and watched The Idol. Why? Because there were so many things online and I was like, you know what? It can't be that bad. And it was. So I'm very late to the party. There's been thousands and thousands of content creators out there already who have made videos about The Idol, but this is my take. What I found very fascinating about the show was the ending, the plot twist at the ending, and the different interpretations that I'll bring up at the end. So first, let's start with the basic stuff. This show is co-created by The Weeknd, Sam Levinson, and Reza Fahim. The Weeknd, we all know, we live in this world. We all know who The Weeknd is. He's actually trying to rebrand himself now as, like, with his real name, Abel Tesfaye. He's one of the biggest artists in the world, and Sam Levinson is the creator of Euphoria. So it was announced all the way back in 2021 that a show co-created by The Weeknd and Sam Levinson was in the works. It was made a big deal online, and then by April 2022, it was scrapped completely. It was previously Amy Simons that was the director, but then they scrapped the whole thing even though it was 80% done, and Sam Levinson took over. There was actually a Rolling Stone article that highlighted all the shenanigans that happened behind the scenes, allegedly happened behind the scenes, and I'll be mentioning it throughout the video. So for those of you who haven't watched the show, I'll do a little recap. So we have our main character, Jocelyn, who is a pop star who's trying to give her career a little boost after she had an emotional breakdown at one of her shows on tour because she hadn't really dealt with the death of her mother that happened. She just decided to go on with the tour even though she was still grieving, and she had an emotional breakdown on stage and then took a year off. And now the first episode we see her, in the middle of a photo shoot shooting the cover of her newest album, and we also see her kind of working on the choreograph for her music video. In episode 2 we actually see her filming the music video. So on episode 1 there's this backup dancer, Diane, that's played by Jennie Kim from Blackpink, that suggests that they should go to this specific club, and that's where she meets Tedros, played by The Weeknd. They meet, they dance, they make out, they talk about music, and unlike everyone in her life that we had seen in the episode, instead of sort of telling her what she wants to hear, he tells her the truth and actually gives her good advice, which is that she should be releasing the kind of music that she wants to. Because the newest single she was about to release, World Class Sinner, she felt like it wasn't the kind of music that she wanted to do. And then another night, she decides to invite him over to her house for the first time. She plays him the song World Class Sinner, and then they remake the song. I'm gonna be skipping a lot of the weird stuff that happens simply because it's just too weird. Like in this episode, when they're remaking the song, he covers her face and chokes her. In what world do we need to see that? But suffice to say, throughout the show, there's a lot of torture and sexual abuse that goes on, and Jocelyn isn't always the only one subjected to it. On episode 2, after a full day of shooting her music video and kind of failing, she invites him over again. This time, he brings his whole posse, his whole cult with him, and then they have like a little weird sex scene, and afterwards, he says that it would be easier because they're making songs now if he moved in. And she said, yeah. So then on episode 3, we see him move in. We see him take over her house. He starts firing people that work for Jocelyn. He starts reinforcing his little rules, his cult rules on her and her friends. And then there's a lot of, again, torture and sexual abuse that goes on. And this torture and sexual abuse is meant to push Jocelyn and the other members of this cult past their limits so that they make good music. It's supposed to inspire them because musicians usually write about things that they've been through. So it's kind of like an experience. Loosely, I'm using that experience, so that this inspires them to write something. So the rest of the episode 3 and 4 are kind of filled with a lot of sex scenes where characters are being tortured. We find out a little bit more about how Tedros runs his cult, like how he has these rules where you're not allowed to say no, or there are no secrets between us. And by the end of episode 4, we see Tedros lose a little bit of this control that he has over Jocelyn. But by that time, she'd already recorded 3 hit singles, which was the goal to begin with. And I'll be discussing episode 5, meaning the finale, later on in the video. The 3 main points that I'll kind of be discussing in this video is the nudity and romanticization of mental illness, the glorification of abuse, and then the ending. Before we start, I'll sort of go through some of the characters that I'll be mentioning, some of the important characters. So we have Jocelyn and Tedros. I also mentioned Diane, and then we have Jocelyn's best friend turned assistant, Leia. We also have Jocelyn's friend slash creative director, Xander. We also have her 2 managers, Destiny and Chaim. And then Nikki, the record label executive. And that's it. So in the first scene of the first episode, we see Jocelyn in the middle of a photo shoot, and it is a photo shoot for her album cover. She's wearing a red silk rope with no bra underneath, and as the photo shoot goes on, she opens it up a little bit at the top to reveal her bare chest. And at this point, the intimacy coordinator on set quickly steps in and informs the photographer that nudity is not included in the nudity rider, only under boob and side boob, and that it would take 48 hours to change. For context, a nudity rider or simulated sex rider is a contract between an actor and the production they are hired by that defines what will happen on set when filming scenes that include nudity or any sexual scenes. It is a way to protect the actor from being pressured into doing something they're not comfortable with. And the moment that Jocelyn, Xander, and Haim find out about this whole nudity rider debacle, they sort of treat it as an inconvenience. And I interpret this in two ways. The first one being that this is kind of Sam Levinson's way of arguing against all the criticism he got for all the nudity in Euphoria. Even actors on Euphoria pushed back against all the nudity that is included in the show. Most notably Sydney Sweeney, who plays the character Cassie in the show, who's a character is sort of known as the ideal woman because she's white, she's blonde, she's sort of voluptuous, very sexy, and she wears a lot of revealing clothing, fits all the beauty standards of today, and she was overly sexualized on the show, which the actor pushed back on when the filming of season 2 rolled around. She was quoted saying, "There are moments where Cassie was supposed to be shirtless and I would tell Sam, I don't really think that's necessary here. He was like, okay, we don't need it." And I think it is this unnecessary nudity that leaves us, the viewers, with a sort of disgusted feeling because it feels exploitative, like an abuse of power. Now, just because it feels like it was exploitative doesn't mean that it actually was. Lily Rose Depp actually came out and said that she enjoyed working with Sam Levinson in The Weeknd. Now, back to the scene. Jocelyn approaches this intimacy coordinator and sort of says a line that is supposed to tip the scales in favor of Sam Levinson and his artistic style.
"It is my body."
And this is sort of drawing from the "my body, my choice" quote that is often used in pro-choice arguments and campaigns, where the whole premise is that no one should tell you what to do with your body. The choices we make when it comes to our body should always be our own, which is literally why the nudity rider exists to begin with. Using that argument against itself in the situation doesn't work. Just because Jocelyn is comfortable with showing her bare chest doesn't mean that other actors or models are. If she wanted to show her bare chest, she should have included it in the nudity rider. The second way I interpret this is kind of a way for the creators of the show to tell the viewers that yes, there's a lot of nudity in the show, and yes, all parties involved are okay with it, and any criticism or attempt of censorship is only going to destroy their creative vision. Because Haim, one of Jocelyn's managers, actually ends up locking the intimacy coordinator in the bathroom. This to me is how Sam Levinson sees all the people that criticize them publicly for all the nudity in Euphoria. They're represented by the intimacy coordinator. And so what is this creative vision that they have? In that same scene, we overhear a conversation being had between 3 people in Jocelyn's team, including Haim, Xander, and Nikki, where this creative vision of the tortured, mentally ill hot girl is discussed. It's almost like the creators of the show anticipated the kind of backlash they were going to get and then tried to shut them down in the show. So Xander asks, "Are we romanticizing mental health?" And Nikki answers with,
"Will you let people enjoy sex, drugs, and hot girls, okay? Mental illness is sexy."
And she kind of goes on to give the explanation that the regular guy is never going to get the chance to get with someone like Jocelyn unless she's mentally ill. So they're not only selling sex, hot girls, and drugs, they're also selling mental illness as a way to get the girl you never thought you could. The damaged girl, the torture girl, the girl riddled with trauma. And this is certainly not a new concept. We've all heard of guys going for girls with daddy issues, going for girls with self-esteem issues or whatnot, and using her vulnerability to their advantage. And this is a theme throughout the show because we see Tedros take advantage of her vulnerable state, of Jocelyn's vulnerable state. There are many scenes where Tedros sexually abuses Jocelyn in a manner that's supposed to be enjoyable for both parties, while also highlighting how vulnerable and broken she is. The scene where she's filming a music video, and in the middle of it, she starts calling out for her dead mother. It's a very emotional scene. It showcases where her mental health is at. Another scene that shows how broken she is a scene where Tedros talks Jocelyn into telling him and the others about the trauma that she has with her mother, which involved her mother beating her with a hairbrush to focus on work. And after the whole music video emotional breakdown, is kind of when Tedros becomes more and more involved in her life. That's when he moves in and everything else. And as they themselves explained at the beginning, the only reason why he got a chance with her is because of her mental health issues. Now, when you watch the show, it's not hard to come to the conclusion that Jocelyn is over-sexualized through the male gaze. We often see the camera intentionally placed sort of down low to expose her behind. We also see Jocelyn wearing revealing clothing, which is just another way of objectifying the character. I mean, in the first episode, the most interesting thing about her is her body, unfortunately. Now, the male gaze, for those who don't know, is a term coined by film theorist Laura Mulvey and highlights the power imbalance between male and female characters on screen, the active and the passive. I'm going to be reading my notes here because it's very important that I get it right. The voyeuristic active gaze objectifies the passive object. The male gaze objectifies the female body. So the female body is presented as an erotic object both for male characters and viewers, because male characters such as Tedros are the bearers of the gaze, so we often get to see the female character through his eyes. So we see Jocelyn most of the time through his eyes, and the camera then pans as if we're seeing it through his eyes. And in that way, the viewers are more likely to identify with the male character because we're seeing everything through his eyes. It's his perspective. It's the male gaze. And it is through the voyeuristic gaze that spectators objectify the female body. In the same way that he objectifies her, we may objectify her as well. So it's like we're giving permission to objectify her. Now, the reason this is frustrating, as I mentioned before, is because her character is reduced to her sexualized body. There's nothing more interesting about her than her body in the first episode or two. Even throughout the show, we never really get a background story for Jocelyn. We kind of get to find out a little bit about her childhood, a little bit about her trauma with her mother, but nothing really concrete. I'm not saying that I want a prequel, but at least something. Maybe some flashback scenes with her and her mother, the role that her mother had when they would have photo shoots or when they were shooting music videos, just so that we know what Jocelyn's missing. Because at this point, when she says, I didn't realize it was going to be this hard without my mother, we don't really know what role her mother played when they were shooting music videos when she was alive. So we don't really understand her grief. I mean, we don't need much. I would have happily traded one of those weird sex scenes for some flashbacks with her mother. And the same kind of goes for Tedros, at least when it comes to the background story of the character. We don't really know much about him. We don't know why the way he is, why he does the things he does, why he runs a cult, or how he even knows to brainwash people in that way. Did he have emotionally unavailable parents? Did he have emotionally abusive parents? Or did that happen to him? What is the background story of this character? We don't really get to know him. And not for a redemption arc, but just to understand why he functions the way he does. I'll give an example. In the Netflix show You, we get some flashback scenes with Joe and his mother and his childhood to kind of get a better understanding of why he's the way he is, why he's a serial killer and everything in between. And it doesn't give him a redemption arc. It's not like we can excuse the things he does. It gives us a reason of why he is the way he is. It sort of enriches the character, because more often than not, evil people aren't born evil. Something happens to them, a traumatic event that completely changes them. It certainly wouldn't excuse the things Tedros did, but it would explain why he does them. That's kind of all we can ask for, just an explanation. So by the end of episode 4, Jocelyn had already recorded, as I mentioned at the top, 3 hit singles, and it was almost finished. And by that time, Tedros was losing control over the situation by the minute. Jocelyn even contacts her ex and does the doing things while Tedros is right outside the room. And when we see Tedros right outside the room, he's kind of heartbroken. There's tears in his eyes. He seems sad. And I guess this is the show's way of kind of showing a softer side of him. But it's very hard to feel anything for this character, especially after the things he's done. So if there's anything I feel for this character, it is just satisfaction, because there is no way that we can see him differently. If we're being realistic, he was probably sad because he realized that he had completely lost control and his plan was falling apart. This rebellion against Tedros and his cult was triggered by Jocelyn having a conversation with one of the people in Tedros' cult, a 17-year-old girl called Chloe, and she sort of tells her that Diane, the backup dancer that suggested they go to his club to begin with at the top in episode 1, had actually been in Tedros' inner circle this whole time. And it was later even revealed that he had been obsessed with Jocelyn for a very long time and had been planning a way to weasel himself into her life. So after she finishes the songs, she invites her team over and plays them snippets of the songs. And she also lets Tedros' little prodigies perform for her team so that they would be on board and let them be in the show, open for her, something like that. And it was at this point that Jocelyn tells Chaim to get rid of Tedros, just cut him a check, however amount he wants, and Chaim tries to do this by cutting him a $500,000 check. However, Tedros heroically refuses to accept the check. And again, this is one of those instances where we're supposed to see redeeming qualities in this character, but it's very hard to see them as redeeming when we've seen everything that he's done. And it's also evident that he feels small and powerless for the first time in the show. So rejecting the money is kind of a way for him to not completely give up control, to keep his dignity and to stand his ground so that he at least has some respect for himself at the end of the day. Now, of course, refusing the check means having to deal with other consequences, and in this case, they had Vanity Fair write an expose on him, which completely obviously ruined his business, his cult, his personal life, and everything in between. And then there's a small time jump 6 weeks later, so she's released the songs. They've done very well, so well that the tour has actually sold out. And with Tedros out of her life, she seemed to be doing very well. And just when you thought that Tedros was out of her life, he appears on screen again. And at this point, I'm left thinking, what is this cockroach doing on my screen? Oh, what is he doing on screen? She apparently invited him backstage to her first show back after her year-long hiatus, and it was in this scene where it was revealed that the hairbrush that she said allegedly her mother used to beat her with was brand new. Now, this sort of plot twist has two interpretations from what I've seen online. The first one being that this sort of reveals that she lied about the trauma that she has with her mother and that she was in control of the whole situation from the beginning, but she made Tedros think that he was in control. The second interpretation is that yes, there was a hairbrush that her mother used to beat her with, so the trauma is real, but then now she has bought a new hairbrush and she's ready to bury the past and move along with the future, and that now she's in control of her life for the first time, and she's even in control of Tedros. I personally interpret it as she faked the whole story, because we even get to hear Xander when he was getting tortured in one of the episodes, where he says that Jocelyn has a way of controlling the people in her life and that she was even controlling Tedros. And why would he say that unless he knew that the story that she told was fake, right? Because he's known her way longer than Tedros has known Jocelyn. And Xander, even as a character, his career was put on hold because her mother and Jocelyn herself felt that he would be a threat to her and her career. They made him sign a contract that said like he couldn't sing or something like that, and that's why he had to put his career on hold for Jocelyn. So all of these things were revealed. But I do want to say that the second theory, there are certain things that would make sense with the second theory. Like for example, when I think on episode 2, Chaim says to Jocelyn that, oh, you know, when he lost his mother, he was a wreck, but of course he liked his mother, or his mother liked him, or something like that, basically hinting at the fact that her mother was not very nice to her. And also, as I mentioned earlier with the male gaze, you know how we have been seeing Jocelyn through his eyes this whole time. In that scene in the ending is the first time we actually get to see Tedros through her eyes. It is when he's backstage, he's sitting and waiting for Jocelyn, and she comes behind him and we see a close shot of her face. So she's looking down at him, we see this, and he's down there, and then the camera kind of pans to him, and it is sort of the same way that she's seeing him, and she's sort of on top because she's standing and he's sitting. And so this is the first time that we're seeing him through her eyes. We see him very, again, insignificant, very small, very powerless, and this could be interpreted as in like she's finally taken control, but it also could be the show kind of showing us the way that her gaze has been this whole time. I don't know if they've thought this through. I don't know if it's like very significant or I'm just overthinking it, but I thought it was very interesting. This was the first time, because when they first met, even when they were talking about music, she was on top, like she was on like the top of the stairs, he was a little lower, but we were still seeing her from his eyes. But now we're seeing him through her eyes, right? And another thing that makes me feel like the story was fake is the way that he reacted and the way she looked at him. He reacted as if like, like it was all fake, and she looked at him like, you know, it has to be fake. Keeping in mind that I have interpreted it the first way, let's talk about Jocelyn for a second. As I said before, kind of like Cassie, she is the ideal woman. She's white, blonde. She's basically Cassie. She's white, blonde. She wears a lot of revealing clothing. She fits all the beauty standards. And I think a reason why we are also left with this disgusting feeling after a sex scene in The Idol, not just in Euphoria, but also in The Idol, is because it feels like Tedros is acting out all of his fantasies on her. And being the ideal woman that she is, written by a man, she doesn't complain. She isn't seen as a victim, because the ideal woman is never a victim. She loves everything that the man does to her. She loves being treated as a sex object. She doesn't complain. She obeys. Even at the end of the series, where we're sort of anticipating a huge plot twist, it is revealed that not only was she okay with the abuse, but she was also in control of it the whole time. And again, the way I've interpreted it. And we're even supposed to believe that she benefited from this abuse. She wrote 3 hit singles and she sold out a whole arena, a whole tour. Now, many people have argued that this show glorifies abuse in the way that they show a victim of abuse. And it's not even seen as abuse. By the way, she's not even seen as a victim because she's enjoying the abuse that's being inflicted on her. But as I mentioned, this goes even deeper. It's not that she's enjoying it, she's also benefiting from it. She's benefiting from abuse because she's writing songs. This is why I was very fascinated by the ending, because it just doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean? And for me, it kind of completely ruins the show. And what stings is that this wasn't the original plot. This wasn't the original ending of the show. Amy Simons, the director that exited in April 2022, her version was about a woman who was finding herself sexually. And with Sam Levinson taking over, it turned into a man abusing a woman and her loving it. In the Rolling Stone article, it was alleged that the reason why the director exited is because The Weeknd felt that he was heading too much into a female perspective. Now, may I remind you that this is a show where the main character is a woman. What other relevant perspective is there? No, they said, you know what the show needs? A male perspective. That's what it needs. Well, you wanted it, and you got it. And another reason why there was a swap of directors was allegedly because The Weeknd felt like they were focusing too much on Jocelyn as a character and not as much on his character. Now, hear me out, I can understand this, because when it first sort of came out that, you know, The Weeknd was creating a show with Sam Levinson, it was sort of made a huge deal because, well, The Weeknd's one of the biggest artists in the world and we were gonna get to see him act for the first time. It was a thing. So I can understand that he felt like after reading the script that after so many people made a huge deal about it online, that he was going to have a significant role in the show. It was kind of like when they announced Jenny Kim was going to be joining the show and they made a huge deal about it online, only for fans to realize that her character barely had a plot. Now, I don't know why he decided to speak up after 80% of the show was already done. They were done with, like, I think 4 episodes. I don't know why he waited that long, but I can understand if he felt like his character needed a little bit more screen time. What I don't understand is why they decided to scrap the whole thing, because they could have kept the female perspective and just integrated his character a little bit more into the show if he had spoken up a little earlier. This was a missed opportunity. This could have been a great show. And the fact that The Weeknd tried to defend the show after it came out, and there was a lot of criticism by saying that all they knew was going to be controversial and it was going to shake the culture, almost as if saying that they were creating something so, you know, ahead of its time and so shocking and provocative, and it was going to shock everyone. And it's so funny because when the first 1 or 2 episodes came out, the reason why people were criticizing it wasn't really the plot. It was Jocelyn's character being over-sexualized. That was a huge point. And also The Weeknd's acting, because The Weeknd's acting is not very good. There were certain scenes where he creeped me out. He did. There was some creepy scenes and he did it very well, but there were some silly scenes and his silly acting. He made the whole show silly, like you couldn't take him seriously. And then I have something that I've been thinking about, which is the race dynamic in the show, which I feel like a lot of people haven't been pointing out. There's a reason why they haven't been pointing out, but I felt that it was relevant to just mention anyways, because I mean, this is a show about a white woman being abused by a black man. Now, the reason why the race dynamic may not be such a big deal on the show is because of The Weeknd. Every time Tedros appears on screen, we don't see Tedros. I don't see Tedros. I see The Weeknd playing a character. Now, as a contrast, whenever I see Lily Rose Depp on screen, I don't see Lily Rose Depp. I see Jocelyn. I completely even forgot Lily Rose Depp was playing the character. You know, you only see the character because it's good acting. With The Weeknd, it wasn't good acting. So the race dynamic is kind of not that big of a deal because it's The Weeknd. You know what I mean? It's an artist. It feels like it's a celebrity. Now, I could go on and on about everything wrong with the show, but at a certain point, I think it's important to highlight all the good things about it as well, because so many people worked on the show and it would be kind of rude to just trash it without mentioning the good things as well. There are certain scenes that are like visually, aesthetically pleasing. Another thing that was great were the costumes. I really liked especially Destiny, one of Jocelyn's managers. She's a plus size woman and the outfits they put her in were incredible, and there was a lot of variation between them. It was great. And then obviously, as I mentioned earlier, Lily Rose Depp's performance was amazing. I mean, she's really sucked me into the show. If it wasn't for her acting, I don't think I would have continued watching after the first episode, and I want to see more of her acting, so I hope next time she finds a project worthy of her talent. I do want to say that the premise of the show, you know, before it was ruined by the ending and everything, it wasn't too bad. If they hadn't overly sexualized Jocelyn, if they had really taken it seriously, because you can show nudity or just have a character that shows a lot of skin without over sexualizing them. Intentional nudity can say a lot about a character and the dynamic between characters as well. If they'd taken it seriously, it would have worked. The second thing that should have changed was the weeknd. I don't know exactly how he prepared for the role. I don't know if he took any acting classes, but the truth is somebody else should have played the role of Tedros. I mean, I know it, you know it, everyone that watched the show knows it, and I think at this point even he knows it. And obviously they should have kept the female perspective, because I think that would have had a better ending. Anyways, that was it. I don't know how long the video is. I don't even know how many people are watching or if you even made it to the end of this video, but if you did, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll be back next week with the Barbie video. Hello, angels. Be serious, be serious. Hello, angels.